I was feeding my dogs right here, and all of a sudden, you know, turning towards, you know, the horizon, towards the house and the pine tree, I noticed something that's not out of the, something's out of the ordinary, like a speck of something dark. And I focused myself, and I said, I kind of I looked at it for a while, and I just couldn't believe what I was seeing. So what I did, I ran inside to my house. I had the camera, my video camera, sitting there by the TV. And I grabbed it real quick, because I had used it on Easter Sunday with my family. And I let it sit right there for a while. So what I did, I brought the camera. And when I noticed the object, I grabbed my camera immediately. And I started to videotape from that angle. I didn't know what to say. I was just speechless, like they say.
Okay. Oh, I didn't know these were on here. These are some of the Miami pictures. Some of the ones that I didn't put on the tape, because I'll kind of go through them here. Here's the kid in Miami. His name is Manny Escondon, is his real name. He's taking notes. Here these discs came in. His girlfriend took the pictures. These are flat-bottom discs. They're made on Earth. They're called Vril discs, V-R-I-L. They're manufactured down in Brazil. They also have a factory down by in New Schwabenland in Antarctica. There's another picture. There's a news copter came in. Look at the first three discs. When they see the copter, they start to turn invisible or put their shields up. And the first three crafts that go out in a series are just becoming invisible when he snapped the picture. It was taken with a Polaroid at a 30th of a second, so it caught it right in the mid of going out there. These discs were designed by German technology in the late 40s. The first ones we know of that were tested out were probably around 47 or 48. They're called Vril levitation devices. As you can see, they actually fly quite well. Notice the nice V formation. Being typical earthbound Air Force pilots, they're still flying in formation. We understand this technology a little bit because intelligence has shot down some of their ships, learned how they're doing it, and when you hear rumors about how the Americans are building flying discs, what we're doing is playing catch-up to the German technology that's been around since the 40s.
William, William.
Their technology has accelerated tremendously. They make two different types of levitation devices. That's what we're doing out at Area 51. We manufacture the devices in San Diego. They're put together by General Electric. We test them at Area 51. Here's the German disc parked down on the ground at a facility down in Brazil. Here's four guys standing next to it down there.
There was four there. Is that a comet? Guys, come here, look! Slade, hurry! What is that? Babe, is that a comet? It is dropping stuff. Watch, guys. Do you see it? I'm recording.
Is that thing?
Yeah, watch that.
There's a whole row of them. You couldn't count how many were down there. He had his Polaroid with him and grabbed a few short shots here. Over here's two guys here on a craft coming in. You can see the two guys standing here. And down here at the bottom, which I know isn't clear, is one of these old bell-shaped crafts. Many of you are probably not familiar, but there was a fellow named George Adamski back in 1962 who claimed to be having contacts with people from Venus. This was the craft he was taking pictures of. George's contacts were real, but he wasn't having contacts with anybody from Venus. The blonde-haired ladies that were inside the craft were actually from Brazil. That's where the crafts were flying out of. They've been making them down there since about 1947. They find it very convenient if they make contact or land somewhere to tell people they're extraterrestrials, and we're very open to it. If they tell them, hi, we're part of a German intelligence group from Brazil, people would freak out.
I'm a retired intelligence officer and flyer with almost 5,000 hours, and I didn't believe in UFOs until London Control called us in the winter of 1962 and asked us, would we chase one? And we said, sure. So
I got my camcorder and I've got my micro lens on here, getting as close as I can to this picture. It's a very, very small Polaroid picture that's about that big, and it got wet in the rain. He left it in the windowsill, so I've ironed it and put it on paper so we didn't lose it. And I'm copying it with my macro. Here's the whole picture. Over here is one of the old bell-shaped discs. Here's one in the air. Notice the platforms they're sitting on. There's a guy standing here. There's a guy over here just coming out of this disc. I'm trying to get real close to the bottom of it here so we can see what they're like.
So we let down from 30,000 feet to 1,000 feet where the UFO was hovering, and we went into a steep dive and actually exceeded the red line of the aircraft. So it's kind of dangerous chasing UFOs. In any case, I was able to get the UFO on the aircraft radar at about 40 miles, and we could see a light out in the distance, and as we closed, we kept on picking up this radar return. The point I'm mentioning that the radar return was very distinct and solid, indicating it was some kind of a metallic object.
This is an area, if you look on a map, I've got a little videotape over there if you're interested in learning more about this information, called Space Cities. I've narrowed it down to about within a 200-mile range where this facility is at and what they're doing down there. Here's the guy standing there. The discs sit down on the platforms. Remember earlier I was telling you about how the condensers charge out the bottom to have to charge the field up? If you get too close to the Earth, the charge dissipates because it's grounded. These metal platforms, they sit them down on the platforms, then they can keep the ship charged up. And if they need to take back off right away, they can. They don't have to wait for the ship to charge back up. The platforms charge them up for them, so they can lift right back off. If they would set it down without the platform on the tripod legs, they got to go through the process again of charging the capacitors up, which takes 3 to 4 minutes. So if they're in a hurry to get away, they're in big trouble.
Between 6 and 8, I would assume.
Okay. They were fairly intense, or?
Yeah, they were very close together as well.
Right, okay.
4 years ago, Kelly Carr was a mother and housewife with no interest in spaceships or aliens. Now she's using technology to reconstruct images of her own encounter.
It does give the idea of the lights there, but you know, the brightness of the light, it gives a good impression, except that the colour doesn't.
In 1978, on January 18th, I was going into the base. Every morning I did the briefing to the general staff, and I noticed that there are some lights off in the distance at the end of the runway there. And when I got into the command post, the senior master sergeant in charge said that there had been UFOs in the pattern all night. They're on radar. The tower had seen them. They gotten aircraft reports and so on. And that one had landed or crashed at Fort Dix. Fort Dix and McGuire are right together. And this is kind of like the Roswell of the East. But in any case, an alien had come off the craft and had been shot by a military policeman, and apparently was wounded and was heading for McGuire. So for whatever reason, the aliens liked the Air Force better than the Army, perhaps because they're shooting at them. But in any case, our security police went out there and found him on the end of the runway dead.
Doesn't seem right.
Kelly's account starts in August 1993.
My husband and I were driving up to my girlfriend's place in Monbulk, which is in the Dandenong Mountains. We were driving on Belgrave Hallam Road, and it was just on dusk. I saw what I thought was round orange lights in the field. It looked unusual to me.
Later that night, retracing their route home, Kelly noticed something else unusual.
It's about a kilometre or so in front of us, about twice the height of the treetops. We could see this object, which at first I thought was a blimp. It had the shape of a blimp, but it was light. As we got closer to it, the light seemed to sort of separate, and it was actually these a row of round lights, and they were orange. It appeared like there was silhouettes standing in these round orange circles, like people, but you could only see the black outline. Well, I just said to my husband, look, there's people in there. And the minute I said that, it shot off to the left of us. Within 1 or 2 seconds, it was gone completely. About a kilometre or two further down the road, as we kept driving, I came across what, at least what I thought, was a screen or a wall of light across the road. And my heart started racing and the adrenaline was sort of pumping through my body, and I'm thinking, we've just seen us back down there, we're in for, you know, a close encounter. Then the next instant, nothing. We seem to have actually covered a fair distance that I don't even remember covering. It might have been possibly close to a kilometre that I don't remember actually travelling. There was no light. There was nothing blocking the road.
Kelly says it wasn't until weeks later she remembered actually getting out of the car that night.
These old bell-shaped discs actually have 3 Mercedes-Benz truck engines in them, driving the magnetic field.
During his hunt into Weiger's life, Randy discovered something extraordinary. Hand-drawn designs for an exotic aircraft dating back to the 1920s. Alex appeared to have invented the very first flying saucer.
That was an amazing find in itself. When I saw the blueprints, it was undeniable that he was the creator.
Weigers called his futuristic flying machine the Discopter. Designed to take off vertically and float on a cushion of air, it was a unique concept, and one he thought cities of the future would make full use of. Weigers patented the Discopter in 1944, and then tried to sell it.
He starts sending all of these letters to all kinds of companies, telling them about his invention.
As word of the Discopter began to spread, Alex felt the U.S. military stole the idea. It was an accusation they denied. But for Weigers, evidence of the theft was there for all to see, as images of his flying saucer seeped into popular culture, influencing everything from architecture to cars and movies.
A 2-seater, ready soon, may be the car or chopper of the future.
There's this whole flurry of stories. Weigers, first with saucer. Dutchman says he designed flying saucer 23 years ago. The man who invented the flying disc. He didn't really seem to be after compensation as much as recognition that he'd done something important and wanted a bit of credit for it.
This was their first design that they made. This was the first ones that the Germans built. These craft here were under consideration, and they were working on them in the end of World War II. When you hear about Hitler's secret weapon at the World War II, if you go back and look at the newspapers, that's what he was talking about. They were in hopes they would get these things up and working, and they would still have a chance then to win the war. Fortunately for all of us, they did not, or we'd all be speaking German today. Interesting side effect too, once they finally did get them up and working, they made lousy war weapons because the field around them prevents you from dropping bombs or anything out of them. It ignites the bombs. So
and I saw that there was another car that had pulled up 100 metres down the road. Then I walked around the front of the car to where my husband was standing on the other side, and we started walking across the road together. As we were walking across the road, I looked down and I saw that the other people were getting out the car and starting to walk as well. So I was quite happy that there was other people there who were seeing the same thing that we were. And we walked up along here to where the fence is. Right out in front of us is this huge craft. I was totally awestruck, you know, it was science fiction coming to life. There wasn't any fear then, it was just all total awe. We stood here, I guess side by side, my husband and I, for about 30 to 45 seconds. Then this tall dark being just appeared in front of the craft, and he was followed by about another 7 or 8 that appeared straight behind him. I felt this energy go through me. It's like nothing I've ever experienced before in my life. It was like some sort of low-level frequency that came in waves, but it was so dense that I could actually physically feel it going through my body. And that feeling absolutely terrified me. It was like, I can't even explain the horror that I felt just feeling this. And I began screaming.
So yeah, but infrasound, there was this talk about that the military was looking for a non-lethal weapon. I think it was. Supposedly it would infrasound, and it was like long, slow wavelength,
low frequency waves.
Frequency, and that it would have the same resonant frequency as some of the internal organs. So it would create fear, nausea, terror. But yeah.
The minute I did, the eyes on these things lit up and they came charging across the field. Halfway across, they split up into 2 groups. Some headed off down there and the rest came directly towards us. I felt this blow to my stomach, and the next thing you know, I'm back here somewhere on the grass. It literally lifted me off of my feet. And I thought I was going to die. I thought if I don't get up now, I'm going to pass out and I'm going to die. I'm not going to come back to consciousness, you know. So
it took them a while. They don't even have weapons on them for a while, and then they had to come up with other kinds of devices. This was the first pictures I saw from the kid in Florida of his German contacts, and to my knowledge, I still think they're his best and perhaps his only contacts. I think he probably had a couple of contacts from these people. They came, they took him for a ride, it looks like on 1 or 2 occasions, and then perhaps they never came back. So we found this situation on several people around the planet. So it's not an uncommon situation.
And this is from ET technology, but it was before 47.
It wasn't ET, nothing to do with ET.
It wasn't?
No, just good old German intelligence figured it out. I can tell you where they got it. It's kind of a long story, but basically it came from German people who had traveled to India to study the concept of the virile, the energy of the universe, and they were trying to figure out how to levitate their own bodies to move in time. And they came back and they explained it to people what they were doing in India, how they were trying to travel in time. And some German engineers tried to build a machine to travel in time, but when they turned the thing on and lifted up off the floor instead, they didn't time travel, but it floated. And they stumbled onto the idea of how to make what's called a virile levitation device. We think they did that probably the first time and sometime probably around 25 or 27. And then the concept laid around in private circles for a while and then became a potential thing during the war, and then really didn't happen until after the war.
And between the National Reporting Center and Peter Davenport and the MUFON, we get 100 reports a week on average of people from all over the United States that see these things regularly. And if you start checking, they're out there and they're low, and people are seeing them all the time. And these are highly qualified people, all of whom essentially give us the reports by email. Thank you.
This week in our series of reports on UFOs, we learned a number of things. That not everybody who sees a UFO is crazy, that our government has lied about UFO information, that it's withheld UFO files, and even spied on UFO witnesses.
Ruth, we've been working on this story for a long time, and we'll tell you right up front that it's going to be hard to swallow at first.
This week, we've heard the contention of UFO researchers that there's a secret government within our government. While that may be hard to believe coming from the UFO perspective, that factions within our government can and do pursue their own hidden agendas outside of the law, outside the control of Congress, or the knowledge of the American people. This is exactly the type of operation we'll hear about tonight. It's a chilling scenario with worldwide implications that may have its roots right here. Area 51, that mysterious corner of the Nevada test site, is no longer much of a secret. The fact that secretive things go on here is a given, even to the Soviets, who make daily spy flights over the facility to take a peek at what's going on. These photos, never before shown in public, are about as close as anyone will ever come to seeing what the place looks like again. The dry bed of Groom Lake, corrugated metal buildings, a 3-mile-long runway, and some highly sophisticated radar and detection equipment. It's been known by many names over the years: Dreamland, the Ranch, the Skunk Works. If ever there was a place to test a secret new technology, this is it. And that's exactly what's been done here for decades. Area 51 is where Francis Gary Powers and the other U-2 pilots were trained in the 50s, and where the U-2 itself was developed. The SR-71 spy planes that spotted Soviet missiles in Cuba in the early 60s were also developed at 51. 51 is where stealth technology was nurtured, where Star Wars devices are still tested, and where all manner of CIA monkey business has been plotted and refined. It's the perfect place for secret things. But of course, that's no secret. You ever see stuff you can't explain?
Sure. Lots of stuff.
Care to elaborate?
No.
On any given night at the Rachel Bar and Grill, you might find 3 or 4 people who work at Area 51, there amid the flowing Budweisers and cowboy hats. You might find them, but they aren't going to talk to you, not about the things they've seen over the mountains. A steady trickle of curiosity seekers flows through here, strangers drawn by strange stories of lights in the night sky. Their questions also go unanswered. No one who's worked at Dreamland has ever publicly acknowledged what so many people have suspected for years, that alien technology is being tested in the Nevada desert. The speculation first surfaced in documents obtained by UFO researchers, documents about something called Project Aquarius. The documents, allegedly prepared for an organization called MJ-12, state that a program to fly recovered alien spacecraft was established in 1972 and is continuing in Nevada. The National Security Agency has confirmed it does have a Project Aquarius, but denies it has anything to do with flying saucers. NSA will not say what Project Aquarius is. No one who knew Area 51 from the inside ever talked publicly about the saucer stories.
Well, there's several, actually 9 flying saucers, flying discs, that are out there.
Despite numerous inquiries and feelers, Dennis has remained anonymous until now. His real name is Robert Lazar, a young scientist with eclectic interests. The choice of Dennis was an inside joke. He says that's the name of his superior at Groom Lake. It wasn't a joke to Dennis.
He called right after and he said, "Do you have any idea what we're going to do to you now?" And I said, "Well, no." And he hung up the phone.
Lazar's story is by any standards fantastic. He says he's telling it in order to protect himself. He says he was hired to work at an area called S4, which is a few miles south of Groom Lake. At S4, he says, are flying saucers, antimatter reactors, and other working examples of technology that is seemingly beyond human capabilities. EG&G, which is where Lazar says he was interviewed for the job at S4, also has no records. It's as if someone has made him disappear.
Well, they're trying to make me a non-person.
Explain. You called where?
Well, the schools that I went to, the hospital that I was born at, past job, and essentially nothing comes up with my name in it.
He smiles, but out of futility, knowing the whole thing must sound ridiculous. According to Lazar, his employer was the United States Navy. He says he and other government employees would gather near EG&G, fly to Groom Lake, then a very few people would get into a bus with blacked out or no windows and drive to S4. When you get off the bus, what do you see?
It's a very interesting building. It's got a slope of probably about 30 degrees, which are hangar doors. And it has textured paint on it, but it looks like sand. It's made to look like the side of the mountain that it's in, whether it's to disguise it from satellite photographs or what.
He says he was never told exactly what he'd be working on, but figured it had something to do with advanced propulsion. On his first day, he was told to read a series of briefings and immediately realized how advanced the propulsion was.
The power source is an antimatter reactor. They run gravity amplifiers. There's actually 2 parts to the drive mechanism. It's a bizarre technology. There's no physical hookup between any of the systems in there. They use gravity as a wave, using waveguides, almost like microwaves.
It took a while, Lazar says, before he actually saw one of the flying discs. However, there were hints everywhere.
Right, they had a poster, and it looked like a commercial poster almost, like it was lithographed and you could buy it at a Kmart or something. But they were all over the place, and it had the disc that I coined the term the sport model. Was lifted off the ground about 3 feet at area S4 on the dry lake there, and the caption on the bottom said, "They're here." And those are just all over the place.
Later, he got to see the real thing.
When I was let in, it was the first time I saw the sport model in the hangar sitting down, and I was told they could have walked me in the front door, but they purposely wanted to walk me by it. I was told not to say anything and just keep my eyes forward and walk past the disc into the office area. And I did, and as we went by it, I just kind of stuck my hands on it just to run it alongside the thing, and you know, that was about the smallest time. After that, I got to see it actually lift off the ground and operate.
But you also, in between that, you saw more than one.
Yeah. The hangars are all connected together, and there are large bay doors between each one. And there were 9 total that I saw, each one being different. Like they had the assortment pack.
Security at S4 was oppressive, Lazar says, and his superiors used fear and intimidation almost as a brainwashing tool.
It did everything but physically hurt me.
Put a gun to your head?
Yeah.
And said what? Actually put a gun to your head?
Well, they did that even in the original security briefings. They had guards there with M16s, and guys slamming their finger into my chest, screaming in my ear, some people pointing weapons at me. Like I said, it's not a good place to work.
So what came to my mind, videotape, keep the camera going. So I'm out here and I'm videotaping and I'm trying to hold on to the dog. And when I noticed the object moved, either my hand shaked a little bit and I felt some sensation, something, but I was just too shocked, you know, I didn't know what was going on. It looked something like round, and it had something at the bottom that kind of shined, but I couldn't tell, so I got my camera, and I zoomed in. That's when I noticed the top part was either going around, it looked like, and then at one time, it did this. But when it did that, my camera captured it, but something happened, you know, I couldn't keep going. And then the object, what it did, it went up, and then it stopped. And then it went like this. And then it went up, and came